Thank you for joining. We are just waiting for a couple of more minutes for a few other people to join, and then we can begin the discussion. Am I audible? I hope hope you guys can hear me. Okay. Thank you, Aditi. Hope you're all staying safe. Thank you for joining us on a Sunday evening. We'll start shortly. We're just waiting for Rituparna to join us, and then we will start with the discussion. Hello. Okay, Rituparna is here. I will just send her a request and then. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you, Rituparna?
I'm good. I'm good. Let me just set this
Yeah, sure.
first. Good?
Yes. So nice to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Yes.
you for having me for this chat.
We are so happy and honored that you could make it. Um, After a minute, maybe I can just talk about the project, why we're here, and just give a short introduction, and then we can get on with the
Sure.
discussion. Just a couple of
Sure.
more seconds, and then we can start.
It's six. I think it's six.
So, I hope we are audible. We can start. Okay. So,
Yeah. Am I audible?
yeah, I hope we are to
I
the.
switched off the
Okay. I think
to
we
get
are.
more sound.
Yeah, so I will just begin. So we are here to, discuss about it's actually a part of our campaign called Periods and Patrikas, and the objective of the campaign is, to demand credible and inclusive reportage, around the subject of menstruation in the media. And we've been having a series of Instagram lives with various stakeholders to understand their perceptions of the gaps in the media in, covering this subject, which is menstruation. So we have Rituparna with us today, and she has been in the industry for over 20 years now, and that
About 20 years.
about
About
20
20.
years. And it's great to have you with us because I bet you're the best person to, run us through the challenges, or just the media's perspective to this whole topic. And before we begin, I think I'll just go through some of just give a brief introduction, and then about you, and then we can begin. So as I said, Rituparna has been in the industry for over 20 years now, and right now she works as a communications um the communications head for um,
Agenda.
Ungender.
Agenda.
Yes. And as a journalist, she has reported on various beats like pop culture. She's done politics, culture. So she is also deeply invested in menstrual hygiene management as well. She was named by Forbes in their 2019 list as one of their women power trail blazers for work with women survivors of violence. And she was also awarded the civilian honor, Karmavir Global Fellowship and Karmavir Chakra Gold Medal by ICONGO and the UN as a key
The
change maker. I'm sorry?
Rex Foundation.
Yes, and between October 2018 and 2019, she has worked in bringing forward hundreds of stories of survivors and helping them seek ways to make workplace safer. And this has been widely documented by the Indian and the foreign media as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Rituparna.
Thank you
And
so much.
to begin, I think the first question would be, since you've been in the industry for quite a long time, would you say that you have seen a positive shift in the way menstruation is being covered in the media? And if you think there has been a shift, do you think you could attribute it to one particular piece that you have in mind? Like something yeah.
Right. No, so I've been I have covered health also in the past, like beginning when I started my career. I worked with the newspapers as well as, with digital media, with wire agencies as well. So one thing I would, so all the reportage that you would see in say early 2000s were driven mostly by also the whole how the period story evolved, right?
Mm.
So period like sanitary pads also has a very interesting history,
Mm.
right from how Kotex came about, how they were basically World War I, the leftover bandages that
Mm.
gradually, was marketed as an option because of their, absorbent, whatever. So then, the shift to the belt and how women, gradually took over because marketing of sanitary products that also changed. But to answer your question, yes, there's been tremendous positive change in the way menstrual hygiene management or period poverty or the topic of menstruation is reported in mainstream media. And
Mm.
thanks to relentless campaigns by private organizations, by menstrual hygiene groups like menstrual safety groups, who made sure that the conversation is mainstreamed. Because for the longest time, see, I keep thinking that people, it's a very common, it's become almost a cliche term that, oh, menstruation is a taboo, right?
Mm.
Menstruation is a taboo. The conversations around menstruation, of course, it is still like there are still walls and barriers in how sort of you describe it. But
Mm.
all these taboos that you hear of are rigidly guarded through systems of caste, class,
Right.
how you approach, how women's bodies are controlled, or
Mm.
how obsession with purity, right?
Mm.
So you can't just sweepingly say it's a taboo.
Mm.
Um, so it interestingly the way you report menstruation also saw that change. So for example, if I were to take you back to say the TV ads or the newspaper print ads
Mm.
of Carefree or that's late 80s, right? And then gradually the shift in the 90s, when all newspapers, like especially mainstream big newspapers, started actually having period campaigns or marketing campaigns. That very interesting shift to from like a mother saying that don't use cloth pad, shift to sanitary pads, one which is a single use sanitary
Mm.
pad.
Mm.
So it was a very very subtle positioning of how cloth pads are primitive. That whole
Mm.
subtle psychological
Yeah.
shift that whatever women have been using indigenously is bad.
Mm.
You need to shift to this new product which is not environmentally sustainable.
Mm.
But it was the whole psychological experiment was also very interesting to watch. So of course journalists covered periods, of course they covered periods, but it was more of um, stories related to menstruation as either as an ailment, like related issues, right?
Mm.
Like um, all the sort of all the other bodily changes that you
Mm.
undergo, or it was the myths, stories around the myths, or if there is any government policy, because we've seen several like government policies in the last, say, 2000, early 2000 to
Mm.
2018, 19 even. So um, it was very straightforward reporting.
Yeah.
So the other thing was that nobody saw um, menstrual hygiene reportage was not an independent, like not, it was not like a independent beat. It was all under health. The person
Mm.
who covered health was covering, all sorts of things. In addition to was also covering, like whenever one of the stories of, would come up. But now, if you see, there is like people dedicatedly write on menstrual hygiene. People
Okay.
dedicatedly write on period poverty. So,
Mm.
of course, it has undergone a lot of change. Another massive thing that, a positive, massively positive thing that you've seen, that the language, the shift in language.
Mm.
Nobody, until like, why, I would say even until 6, 7, 10 years, um, nobody would even imagine in Indian media to use the word menstruator.
Mm.
It was always women who menstruate. It was
Yeah.
always women who have periods, right? To the inclusive language to bring in trans people who also,
Mm.
menstruate. So the language has also undergone a shift. And
Right.
that shift has taken time solely thanks to the internet boom, where you could at the fingertips check things,
Mm.
knowledge, like academic papers were available, experiences, there were collective blog sites, there were social media.
Mm.
You could read about the experiences of menstruators. That
Mm.
added a lot
Right.
to the whole way it was reported.
Mm. So, when you say that there has been, it's largely positive, it is highly connected to people telling their own stories through blogs and social media and all of that. So, however, when we talk about mainstream media itself, it's still there are still certain gaps that need to be there is awareness that it needs to be rectified, but the work is it's quite slow. So what we have also done a bit of research for the project itself, and based on our research we found that more than 80% of the stories on menstruation did not really add any critical perspective to the story. Like you said, it was just plain reporting. It did not really connect it to any policies that are in place. There are so many government policies, like you said, that are in place, but somehow the connect and really zooming out and looking at the larger picture doesn't seem to happen in the mainstream media. Would you say that? Why would you say that this is? Is it a drawback of the format, or what could it be?
Because because me- because people who bleed are invisible to
Mm.
a lot of newsrooms, to a lot of the way these stories are reported.
Mm.
Their experiences for the longest time, like I said, it was so. I also remember that you asked that what was that, was there a story? there, I wouldn't say there was a particular story, but say the first, like, so through the 90s, like 90s, 2000s, right?
Mm.
Um, say, for example, the Sabarimala petition was way back in 1990s, and that over subsequently through court petitions, it
Mm.
only in 2016 you saw 2016 to 18 you saw the judgment, but the story is continuing. Another
Mm.
story, like, so the menstruation field has had several stories of, especially when you cover period poverty. The bead story of, sugarcane farmers, I think, was a seminal
Yeah.
story in the way you looked at bodies, and you looked
Mm.
at period poverty, and you looked at the way, just like
Yeah.
women's
Lack of
rest, women's
workplace
need,
policies.
lack of
Mm.
workplace, the conversation around Swachh Bharat Abhiyan when it started was also supposed to happen on menstruation as well, menstruating women and as well. But if you see, largely now the conversation is on toilets, like available.
Mm.
Of course, the both are related. The two are related. Without toilets, without hygiene. So the to answer your question, what are the gaps? Because obviously there is always, like, government,
Mm.
not government policies, but there is always, in the last decade, it was also the boom of the environmentally sustainable options,
Mm.
right? Of, menstrual products.
Mm.
That several companies, where there were just the three top brands,
Mm.
vying for the market space. Suddenly, small, startups, small organizations started on seed funding. They started um, exploring other environmentally sustainable options for single for menstrual pads, including the tampons,
Mm.
and I mean, not the tampons as an environmentally sustainable, but alternative products to sanitary pads. Menstrual cups started getting slowly popular, but still, It is not. At least it wasn't until a few years ago. It was not a story that editors would, commission someone unless it was a
Mm.
human rights story.
Right.
So just the need for, women's bodies, that this is something, millions of menstruators go through. So this is a viable story of. It's not. It's very easy to say there haven't been any coverage. Of course, there has been, but
Mm.
prioritizing it was never. Um,
Right. Mm.
only started it only started with, I feel, the digital exploration of personal stories, and
Mm.
when people, started talking about this in forums, and plainly, I would say, due to unavailability of, and NGO
Right.
workers who started documenting the last mile connectivity, and just the complete unavailability of single use sanitary pads in,
Mm.
remote pockets, or any other option, actually.
Mm.
Leave alone sanitary pads, like any menstrual product, hygiene products. So when that started to happen, then you in 2018, the menstrual tax, after, got abolished. So that was a great step.
Mm.
So the campaigns have been running. It's not like there haven't been stories there. It's not, but mostly menstruators are invisible
Right.
because it's not a priority. It's not a
Mm.
priority unless it's a human rights issue. The Beer story got so much attention because it's a human rights issue, and
Right.
menstrual stories also, another big reason is people think it's a women's issue. It's not
Mm.
women's issue.
Mm.
So the minute something is a women's issue, it's delegated to page 7,
Mm.
uh, boxed with other related healthcare issues of women.
Right.
So it's not seen as a socioeconomic issue. It's not seen
Mm.
as a human rights issue. Like the right to sanitary hygiene is a fundamental right, or should
Right.
be.
Mm. Mm.
Right to a sanitary pad should be a fundamental right. So
Mm.
it's not seen as that. So because of, like, the digital narrative changing, there is even, like, the bit of stories that you see.
Mm. So that was actually going to be the other question, right? So how when it comes to politics, for example, a common man would really know what the process is behind a media organization picking up a certain story and writing about it, right? Why and how would an organization pick up stories around menstruation and report it? Like what leads that to happen? What is the process behind that? And when you write stories, what are some of the things that you just have to do? What is your checklist before you report on a subject that is so complex, as menstruation, which has many layers, so many stakeholders, right? How do you go about it as well? You can.
So every story has to have a focus because see, even with menstruation, even this, a lot has been written. Like my writing on menstruation, a large part of it is also my personal journey, in the sense that I've always had like how can I put this, for want of a better word, like a violent, sort of my body's reaction to periods. And
Mm,
I've written about it multiple times. Dysmenorrhea is something that in our country, it's not taken seriously.
mm,
Women's pain in general is not taken seriously. It's not something that, which is why women don't sort of women hesitate to talk about, even during the period leave debate. If you see, it suddenly became okay, like, if you talk about this, then you will be not seen seriously at the workplace. This
right.
is exactly the reason why women haven't spoken up about,
Mm,
actual pain that they go through every month, or for some it's actually much much worse.
mm,
So I have always written about dysmenorrhea. I have always spoken to, like, sort of written and spoken to doctors about what is the cause. And so one way of I approach a story is just based on individual experiences, because menstruation is deeply personal. The
mm,
experience is also deeply personal, and women's bodies, like menstruators, their bodies are also, you cannot homogenize the experience.
right.
You cannot say that somebody's, just because they are having a normal period, that means what is the big deal, like it's just once in a month. It's, of course,
Mm,
periods are normal, but how your body reacts to it is not, like,
mm,
for many many people. So my, of course, the approach I take is to see that how does the story make sense? Who does the story make sense to? So if I could just take you through, like, so for example, for Youth Ki Awaaz,
mm,
I wrote the story um, about this, women in, like, frontline workers who are wearing the protective gear, PPE,
yeah,
them bleeding inside the PPE.
right.
And till I wrote that story, there was nobody had written that story. So all the doctors that I interviewed, all the ASHA workers, that I interviewed, all the people in the front line, fighting this COVID, basically all
Mm,
the COVID front line responders. I was very interested to see how what are the experiences in periods inside the PPE
right.
for 12 hours, because you can't take off the PPE.
Mm,
So, what is the experience? So, your menstruation, for me, for example, for your menstruation stories, always have to be guided by who you're talking to and
mm,
who do you want the story to impact. So, so a lot of it, that story resonated with a lot of people, because just the human interest angle to it,
mm,
that we don't seem to even think that, women doctors who are in PPE, in protective gear, you you completely don't, like, the gear is also very gendered. It's very gendered. It's like you don't think that their body might, go through
mm,
this, which is
mm,
precisely what happens to, like, so many people. That when you talk about bodies, when you talk about periods, you don't think of, trans people who
mm,
bleed. You don't think, you just instantly erase the experiences of so many people.
right.
So for me, it's always, so for example, when I'm writing about periods in religion, it has to take into account all the women who've been kept out
Mm,
of kitchens, of temples, of
mm,
homes. So this aspect has been covered, like, in the past as well. women's this whole stormy relationship of menstruation with society.
Yeah.
So, for example, Reuters International, I was with Reuters, has always run stories about menstrual huts and the people who are kept out of homes, the whole exclusion angle. So I definitely look at, there are two kinds of stories. The what is ongoing. So if there is a new policy, if there is, so for example, when I think way back in 2000, Goonj, I think, introduced the rupees 5 rupee pack of period sanitary products. Then the government as well, like, they had multiple surveys, 2002, 2012, they had multiple surveys. So A, it's driven by what is happening, like
Right.
news driven reporting. That this is happening, so we need to report it. The B is, of course, experience driven. That which part, what are the communities that are, that are not written about? Who are the people who are not benefiting from these schemes? So that sort of has always driven.
Right. So it was interesting when you said that stories around, the whole exclusion and discrimination when it comes to, menstruators. Um, so in the survey that we put out as well, when we asked people, what do you want to see reported in the media? They said we need to see we need to explore the taboos a bit more. But it is also another perspective that when stories as such are reported, it comes with a lot of negative baggage. And so how do we sort of find the balance between reporting something that might send the negative side to menstruation to the reader, whereas something that is just very critical with a lot of data points that you can really engage with in a very scientific way. Do I make sense? How do we find the balance in the media?
I'm not sure, like, what is a negative, like, story. So, for example, for me, a negative story would be actual stories of bias, like that story of college girls who were stripped down to their underwear to check if they were bleeding, right? And they were stood in a row, and somebody went around checking their underwear to see this college. This recently happened, right? A year ago
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
To me, that is a negative story. Like any story that has that is talking about our bodies, any story that is talking about our basic right to menstrual, like easily attainable, sustainable, and affordable menstrual hygiene product. Um, I feel that it doesn't matter whether the story is negative or it doesn't. Like, the perception doesn't really matter. Any story that is coming out of data, and there's enough data that is around, so I'm not sure. Like, I'm not sure how to answer that, because the balance is, I mean, we don't have to balance menstrual stories. We just have to be sure that, the what we are reporting is right, and we're not excluding anyone in our
Right.
reportage, and we are sort of highlighting the experiences that have a potential to make a change.
Hmm. Okay. And also, do you think that there have been a lot of studies that state that, the demographic within the newsroom, right? The women, the representation of women, of gender non-binary people, or people from the DBA backgrounds is still marginal, right? Would you say that that would affect the way we approach stories, like the media approaches stories?
Of course. So,
Mm,
see, one thing I really, really like, I've noticed that who's telling the story
mm,
matters a lot. So, for example, if you take away menstruation, like any topic, take any topic, anything that matters to women and has been for like decades, like not just in Indian media, in any media across the world, if you see, if there are women in decision making positions, they channel resources more to,
mm,
stories that matter to women. They understand what what are the issues that matter to women that needs highlighting, which is why we are, sort of campaigning for 33% reservation in parliament, that we're campaigning for more tickets to women leaders. It's the same in every field. So in media especially, there has never been a dearth of women. I'm sure like the gender ratio is not a problem here. Media has always had like a large um, population of women. Like men women ratio has in media has largely been all right. Like it's not that it's a male only newsroom or anything. It was, of course it was, like when people in the 60s 70s, of course it was, 80s too. But over the years, over 20 years, 30 years, it's there are a lot of women in media and the ratio is fine. But what media doesn't have at all is diversity. So there are no, like you said, there are no DBA people, there are no non, like, so it's also whether they are or not depends on sort of what are your policies of hiring. I don't think any media organization sets aside roles or sets aside a certain number of hirings specifically for for diverse hiring, like so for DBA community, for queer community. So it has never been done. Increasingly now a few organizations do that, but in 20 years I've never ever come across a job description or a advertisement asking specifically that this role we encourage people from DBA community to please come and apply. No, never. So what the repercussion of that is, how you tell a menstruation story is directly dependent on who's writing the story. If upper caste men and women are writing period stories, it will completely whitewash the reasons why women are kept out of temples. It will completely whitewash caste. It will completely whitewash the fact that menstruation is also deeply political. It's deeply body politics. It's rooted in caste. It's rooted in all sorts of upper caste injustices. And it sees women's bodies as procreating tools. And those, if unless you have people who've experienced that telling those stories, you're not going to, So I'm so delighted with, the more and more digital organizations and especially independent media organizations, they come up, and I see all sorts of, authors, I see all kinds of people writing about these experienced stories of growing up. It gives me it gives me enormous joy that it's coming through the direct voice. It's coming right from the community. It's coming from people who experience this. So who gets to tell a story is also political. Unless you have representation in newsrooms, the stories are always going to be seen through the lens of the majority.
Right. So another maybe I think I'll have another one more question after this, and then
Sure.
So one question that I have is, if you've seen a lot of you have a lot of experience in the media, therefore you know what goes, all the behind the scenes, right? So if you have to say that you want to see the media change one thing on priority, what would it be when it comes to reportage around menstruation?
A cover more, it's I'm sort of like, so there's something it's very difficult to explain. So every time media, I know that this is sort of myth busting. Like every time there is a solar eclipse, this is this, do not believe these things, do not believe these things, and these are the myths related to menstruation. That's good, but I would sort of, they also add to the myth making, by the way. So one thing, that apart, more and more coverage of the different kinds of issues associated with menstruation, more dedicated coverage of community issues. Like, it's because this is very important. Like, the reason why I'm saying this is very important is a lot of violence that happens against women happen when women are out in the field, without toilets. They have to change a pad, without, in community washrooms that don't have bulbs. It has to be like, more stories of community, more stories of rallying our campaigns around safe menstrual hygiene, has to be there, and there have to be dedicated people writing these stories, because it directly relates to the experience, the sexual like experience of a lot of women in India and a lot of menstruators in India. It relates to their safety. It's no longer that they don't have access to a pad. It's that they are raped when they are getting out in the middle of the night. It's that they have to, they don't have water, so
Yeah.
all of these
Interconnection.
associated human rights problems, like associated issues of access to clean water, access to potable water, access to bathrooms, access to gender neutral washrooms in urban spaces, just urban planning and infrastructure. If you take a walk on the national highway, how, tell me, at what frequency do you see toilets for women? It's only in the petrol pumps, and then again only the washrooms that you cannot enter. They are so dirty. So there are a lot of stories from communities. The other thing is the last mile connectivity. There are still in remote areas communities that don't use any form of menstrual hygiene product. They don't use cloth pads. They don't use sanitary pads. Not a single, like, no form of menstrual products. So where our implementation is where we, our country's implementation is where we, sort of suffer. So the last mile connectivity is an issue, which is why, if you notice, for all the rallying thing around cloth pads and environmentally sustainable thing, the largest used product today, any survey will tell you, is the single-use sanitary pad, which is not environmentally sustainable,
Yeah.
but easily available. But it is easily available. So there are several issues, like menstrual involve more men and boys in this conversation. Why? Because the menstrual economy is as important as, the body politics of side of it, the socio angle to it. Because who controls money in households? The men control the money in most households. So the men decide how much money to set aside to a woman for, their daily menstrual hygiene. So when women are, so I the reason why I love, this subject is because it ties in with every single other things that we do.
Right.
It ties in with women's independence. To, if they don't have financial independence, they don't get to take the call that I'm going to buy this product and this product. I am not going to buy, this product. Or I may need like an extra, or, any, for that matter, any sexual hygiene product, the contraceptives, safe abortions. It ties in with everything we do.
Right.
So there are mine houses. Like, there's so many stories to write, um, and I know many media organizations these days write it. I hope many more do, and they need dedicated. It can't be part of your health and health coverage. It has to be dedicated campaigns. It has to be dedicated write-ups,
Right.
and let the people, and also like going back into the community for them to tell their own story.
Right. Yes. These are like the this I'm so glad I asked this question because you said it so beautifully that it really there are so many interconnections and nuances to this that it can really affect. It comes down to your independence and your agency, and how that needs to be represented.
Your
Thank you so
safety,
much.
your safety,
Sorry.
your physical safety.
Safety, yes, yeah. So before I end, I mean, it's not just about the reportage, right? The campaign itself, we want to make the readers more aware about what kind of stories they need to be looking at, and like demand from the media, right? That these sort of stories don't work with us. We need stories that represent us, right? So, what would you say to the audience? Right, like how would you advise them to consume news around the subject?
So I'll give you a very interesting example. So anything that my theory of, like, even when I report anything,
Mm,
my theory is what would I like to read? Like
mm,
what would matter to me? Like
mm,
what is it that um I haven't seen in newspapers, and the minute I see it and I was like, oh, this is me. This is
mm,
my life they're writing about, right?
mm,
So
mm,
I'll give you a very interesting anecdote. So one day I tweeted that um, there are no triple XL pads in India except for one company, one major company who makes it, and one other,
right.
small, I think one other startup companies who make it. There are no triple XL pads in India, and if they are, the companies that make it, one or two, they're extremely expensive. They're
Mm,
really expensive. So it's I can't tell you the response to that. Like, people just flooded that tweet with
wow.
stories that, oh my God,
Mm,
yes, because
mm,
our bodies are not same. Our
mm,
bodies are not same. People said that I've worn adult diapers because of the lack of triple XL, pads. For people who are slightly on the heavier side, people with,
mm,
weight issues, or just it's
yeah.
just you can't just have one size fit all. Our
Mm,
bodies are
mm,
not the same. So the fact that um, design, when women's products for women are designed,
mm,
who is doing the designs?
right.
Just having women out, in these teams, when they are putting in the blueprint and
Mm,
thinking that, oh, this teeny tiny wisp of pad is going to be okay for, because what, 90% of Indian bodies are skinny? Is that it? So, which
right.
means that there are no women, like, there are
Mm,
very few women who are probably looking at it and
yeah.
thinking that, hey, no, this is not for me. So,
Yeah.
I know many people who add, like I do it. I
Mm,
used to do it, and I still do it sometimes. Like, so they add two pads, like, lengthwise
wow.
to make it longer,
Mm,
right? So,
mm,
you're spending double also. If you're a heavy bleeder, you're also spending double on
right.
menstrual products.
Right.
So nobody thought of it that we need, like, more the market to be flooded with products that are suited to my body.
Mm,
I asked in a community when I was, writing on menstrual cups. Our assumption is I got very, very interesting results when
mm,
there was so I distributed menstrual cups amongst a group of economically backward women in Noida. So I was stumped that the I went with the assumption that they'll be very which is my privileged. It was a privileged point of view that
mm,
they'll be,
true.
hesitant, reluctant towards using cups. They took two cups and they're like, okay, we've been using this, like, for a while now. And the people that I thought would take to it were
Mm,
worried about
right.
virginity and the intrusive nature of tampons and cups.
Mm, mm,
So
mm.
you cannot predict how women react, because every woman approaches a menstrual product with a deeply, deeply personal aspect
Right.
to it. Like, what would suit me? What would, help me have better, more comfortable periods?
Mm,
So, if somebody is reading it, so for example, if somebody is reading a story and responding saying that, hey, like I need a triple XL pad, then force media organizations to write those
Report on.
stories. The
True.
reason that these reasons why these survey type tweets are also to gauge a response.
Right.
I try to gauge a response that, is there a market for this? Like, what are people thinking, basically? How are people reacting to this? So it's media, the people who write on menstruation also have to be very sensitive to the fact that it's user sensitive. This is an area which is vast. There are so many layers to it. There are so many, like, there's so many angles to it. It has to be personal. It has to come from personal experiences, and every person's experience is different. So it cannot be, the worst thing that you can do is people generally homogenize the whole thing, which happened during period leave also. They just homogenize the experience of women's bodies, saying that no, you will be discriminated against, or no, like, all menstruators need this, so we must have a compulsory thing. No, you should have the option, and then you take that option if you need it. You don't take that option if you don't need it. And it's so personal. Even during the period leave, if you read each and every story or response, you will realize that the responses are extremely personal. They're very personal, and everybody was like going the extremes. Like, either somebody was saying, because it is like that, our bodies, our reaction to things are extremes because it's our body, and we react to it in a very personal way. So that's what media should track. There are so many stories that don't come out. I give you an example of the beet sugarcane farmer story. That was horrific.
Yeah.
You know, undergoing forced hysterectomies because periods would, slow them down, and they're just not in the position there. So it was one of the most heartbreaking stories that I've read in a long time. And this is not new. This is not new. Women have had uterus removed due to infection because they're using sand and cloth and unwashed, So again, coming back to how menstruation ties in with everything, patriarchy. Patriarchy, the ability to hang a washed cloth pad in the open.
Yeah.
And doing it confidently. The ability, belts, menstrual belts, when they were first, like the pad that came with the belt. It's fascinating when you think about it. When they first came in, what did the belt mean? The belt meant that it was meant for women who wore underwear. And not every woman in India at that time when it came in. Which are the women it was targeting? Women wearing some sort of pant, salwar, some sort of underwear, right? So it was even the adhesive pads when it first came in, of course, for our utility, for our comfort. But these are very, like, when you think about it, they were targeting a certain, they're targeting a certain section of, users. So menstrual stories are very personal. They tie in with gender, they tie in with patriarchy, they tie in with so many things.
Right.
That's what readers should look out for, and that's what media should focus on.
This was great, Rituparna. Thank you so much for taking time off on a Sunday and joining us. And I will share this live on our IGTV as well for people who want to view it. And yeah, so thank you so much for coming, joining us.
Thank you so much. It was lovely. I'm so sorry if I overshot your time.
No. It's perfect. This is great. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye. Thank you all for joining. I am Nipana.